I would like to give you, within 20 minutes, which is a challenge, a European policy perspective on sustainability indicators, evaluation and governance mechanisms. I work at the Vienna University of Economics, which actually you don't have to know, although it is a 100 years old university just focused on business and economics, and it's Europe's largest educational institutions. We have about 27,000 students, all of them studying business administration, management and economics. And it is located in Vienna, which perhaps you know from nice dancing and waltzes and so on. And it's a nice town. It was ranked first for quality of life by Mercer Survey, and we're very happy about that. I'm leading a research institute there. It's one of 14 research institutes at my university. We're doing interdisciplinary research on sustainable development on all the different levels, and my presentation I will focus on the international level, European level and national level. I will not focus on corporate level because this is then the duty of the next speaker. And we're doing a lot of work for European authorities, as for example Eurostat, which is the European Statistical Office. We're working in 5 areas, 2 of them out of projects from 2 areas, from the area of governance for sustainable development and evaluating sustainable development. I just picked out several case studies, several research findings, and put together a presentation in 4 steps. First step will be about the European Sustainable Development Strategy, the governance mechanisms behind it and the indicator sets used. Second one will be about some, well, just 2-3 cases of national sustainable development strategies. Well, we have 27 European member states, and to pick out cases was a little bit a challenge. I will have a few words on monitoring sectoral programs in Europe, and then end up with policy learning through reporting. Is there any chance for policy learning through reporting? So let's start with the European Sustainable Development Strategy. I think there is a kind of similarity to what happens in Canada with the federal level and the provincial level. It's similar because we have a European Sustainable Development Strategy, and we have some national sustainable development strategies in all the 27 member states, and some of them for more than 10 years. The European Sustainable Development Strategy has been renewed 2 years ago, and within this renewal of 2006, 4 years ago. And within this renewal procedure, there was the idea of multi-level governance, that the European Sustainable Development Strategy has a clause in it that all the reviews of national sustainable development strategies should be undertaken in the light of the European Sustainable Development Strategy to make sure that the national strategies are coherent with the European strategy. And there should be some national progress reports sent to the Secretary General, which is a European institution, and they put together a European Sustainable Development Progress Report, and this should be a governance cycle. Then, in parallel to this, there are some progress reports from different Directorates General, which are some kind of European ministries. So Directorates General are legal entities within the European Commission, and the national statistical offices deliver data to Eurostat, and Eurostat puts together a monitoring report based on the national data sets. So you can say this is a kind of feedback cycle which is rather on a qualitative base and on a policy issue base, and this is a kind of quantitative monitoring cycle. So this combines qualitative aspects, which perhaps have some information about accountability, and the rest is statistical number crunching stuff. This happened just once, because after 2 years they just skipped the national monitoring reports due to lack of time and economic crisis and so on, and they said, okay, it's enough to have the number crunching. We can learn enough out of number crunching, so this is where we are. Several countries would like to have these progress reports in the future as well, and we will see what happens next year or the year after. So what is within this monitoring report? If you are interested in, you can download it from Eurostat website. I've got one of them with me. I don't want to take it with me back to Europe again, so you can have it. So there are some key challenges in the European Sustainable Development Strategy. There are 7 key challenges. It's not just environment. There are some environmental issues in it, as for example climate change and clean energy and conservation and management of natural resources, but you also have some aspects of sustainable consumption and production, which you can take as the economic pillar of sustainable development, and public health, for example, and global poverty as the social dimension of sustainable development. Then you have sustainable development indicator themes. They are rather in parallel. So indicators and objectives rather fit together rather nicely. And there are two more, because they are not covered by now in the key challenges of the Sustainable Development Strategy. It's about socioeconomic development and good governance. These were just added by the Eurostat, saying, well, we shouldn't forget about it. They are not part of the strategy right now, but they seem to be important. So when you take these ones, you have some so-called headline indicators. For example, for socioeconomic development, it's the growth of GDP per capita. For public health, it's healthy life years, and so on. So these headline indicators were selected in order to mirror the key challenges in here. So one indicator that should show all what is in these broad issues. I think I will come back to this question of mirroring objectives on a broad level in just one indicator later on. Then we've seen that in two areas there is recent indicator development. One is about the debate of well-being indicators. I think this is similar to what happens in Canada right now. And there is even a debate about beyond GDP by the European Commission and the so-called Stiglitz Commission in France. And there is a project conducted by a consulting company on behalf of Eurostat on the development of indicators in the area of globalization, global partnership, and good governance, because these areas, we are missing indicators for good governance right now. They don't fit to the idea of good governance if you just count the numbers of people taking part in the last elections. This is just one indicator that you can count, but it's not enough to monitor good governance. So the European indicator set is a pyramid of indicators. You have headline indicators, you have general policy performance indicators, you have on detailed level some indicators for actions and some explanatory variables, and you have contextual indicators. The idea behind it is that this is a pyramid of headline indicators for all over objectives, and then breaking it down more into details. Well, the analysis Eurostat has put together, and we've worked for them for more than 1 year now on this report, it's very descriptive. It's just number crunching. It's just showing what is happening and some very, very weak links to policies. So, well, off record, yeah, okay, the camera, okay, on record, speaking, Eurostat is not allowed to write about causalities and links to policies. They are allowed to report figures, and when then they would have to say, these figures show that climate protection policy in Europe failed, they are not allowed to say so. They are just allowed to show the figures, and other ones should take the conclusions. I think this is really a thin line we have to go through between shaming and blaming, which is obviously not the job of Eurostat, and with just delivering data without any interpretation, which also cannot be best case. So there are some different ways of how to present it. You can have a look at this in detail. The maximum we were able to say is about weather symbols. So this was the only thing which we were allowed to do. There are some monitoring reports. There are around 100 indicators analyzed in this monitoring report. This is a so-called neutral statistical assessment linked to policy processes, which is a very diplomatic term. So this is about the EU strategy. Our lesson learned was if you combine quantitative monitoring and qualitative feedback, it's much more effective than just number crunching. And we're rather sad that we don't have this feedback cycle anymore. So what about national sustainable development strategies in Europe? Just to pick out some of them. I don't want to go into the details of all of these cases, just show you some kind of different trends. On the one hand, you have countries where you have a low number of indicators, for example, France, 12 indicators, Germany, 29. And in other countries, you have huge indicator sets. United Kingdom, 180, Italy, 190 indicators. So that's very different all across Europe. Obviously, it's easier to communicate when you just have a small number of indicators, but you have a low explanatory power. while you can explain nearly everything out of these indicators, but it seems to be rather confusing and difficult to communicate. Then the question is, are these indicators developed in a policy-based development process or a model-based development process? Well, all of them, all the selection of indicators is based on their availability. So the first question about indicators is, do we have them? And if we don't have them, how much money does it take to have them? And if it takes too much money to count all of these rare species every second year, we don't count them. That's the way it is. So the first question is the data already there? Is it regularly updated? And is it appropriate for the Sustainable Development Objectives? And then you can either develop these indicator sets based on policies or based on models. So when you develop it based on policies, they have a close link to sustainable development policy making, but perhaps the indicators may ignore key aspects of sustainable development. Because you have the objectives, you measure the objectives, and if you don't have any objectives, you don't have any indicators, you don't measure it. If you go for an indicator development based on models, as for example, Austria, Belgium, and Norway is a very interesting case because it's a capital-based approach, then it is based on a sound theoretical framework, not on the priorities politicians have set, but there are only weak links to sustainable development strategies then. So you have also in this area to find a way through. In many cases, it's a policy-driven approach to sustainable development indicator sets. So first, you have sustainable development objectives. Then you're looking for the right indicators, which are fit best to monitor progress in achieving these objectives. And then you set up your indicator system. In some cases, the advantage is that you can replace these indicator sets when you find better sustainable development indicators without changing the policy document. And you can change the policy document without changing the indicator set when you renew the strategy. So it's a rather good idea to have these two things not linked together too strong. Then the question is, how broad are the indicators? How narrow are they? They might be like that. They might be even like that. So the indicators are even broader than the objectives. It could be like that, but it shouldn't be like that. So if indicators are totally in a different area as the objective, you can't measure anything with these indicators. But I think you're professionals in this area. I don't have to tell this to you. Interesting case, Germany. They just selected 21 indicators. Yes, the idea was Agenda 21, so they had 21 indicators. So they wanted to have 21 indicators due to communication reasons. And then they set their targets based on these indicators. So in Germany, you have a strong link of 21 indicators and 21 objectives. The advantage is that these indicators have an important steering function and they are easy to communicate. But, as I said before, it's a little bit inflexible. You cannot change the indicator set without changing the political priorities, and the other way around. So, as I already have shown you in the Eurostat report, when it's about communication, well, there's not a lot of creativity in communicating indicators in Europe. So I think it's the first time that Eurostat employed, together with us, a press expert, helping us how to put together indicators and how to communicate them. Most of the times you find traffic lights, weather symbols, smileys, arrows, and so on. In the United Kingdom, they prepared a pocket book on indicators, and we were told that this is the most read publication of sustainable development in the UK because it's so small, you can put it into your pocket. Okay, so even that's a nice experience. How long do I have? Okay. So we learned in this area that when you have to select appropriate, easy to understand and easy to communicate indicators. Now if we have a look at sectoral programs, there are 3 big sectoral areas where most of the money is spent in Europe. And if you want to evaluate, follow the money. 3 areas: research and development, agriculture, and cohesion policy. And I just took out one, which is about research and development. It's a huge program. It's a so-called 7th Framework Program for Research and Development, and it's about 50 billion euro being spent for research projects over a period of 7 years of time all over Europe. And the question was how to monitor this huge European-wide program. So you have the framework program with different themes. For example, the themes health, food, agriculture. So research on health, food, agriculture, nanosciences, energy, space, security, and so on, is funded by the European Union. Altogether, this is done by annual work programs, which you can see as an annual call for projects, call for proposals. And each year, about 700 topics are published, and you can submit your research idea to one of these, or even more of these 700 topics. Some impacts occur through dissemination of results, through diffusion of technologies, and so on. And all of this happens in a very complex area of society with external factors, these impacts on environment, technologies, markets, and so on. And at the very end of this, there should be some impacts, and there should be some improvements, and there should be some progress in achieving the objectives of the Sustainable Development Strategy. So on the one hand, we have the strategy, on the other hand, we have the program, and a very, very complex of chain of effects in between. So how to monitor this? How to evaluate this? As I already said, 7 years, 50 billion euro, 5,000 topics, 10,000 projects, 7 key challenges, 60 objectives, gives more than 500,000 potential impacts. That's a huge number. So what we did on behalf of DG Research, we put together a public platform, and we did some very, very rough estimations based on cross-referencing the work programs and the EU Sustainable Development Strategy. We did not do any kind of project analysis by now, and not any kind of outcome assessment, but altogether this will be put to a public platform, and this will be a kind of proxy, saying you have with this public platform an overview of the impacts of the different topics, of the different activities coming from this huge framework program on the objectives set in the Sustainable Development Strategy. So the benefits of this monitoring system will be a continuous information and transparency. It will address the scientific community as well as media, the general public, and political decision makers at national and EU level. And it will be a public platform that you can also approach from Canada. You can drill down all of this information to the individual topic and project, and you can even put in your feedback, saying, okay, I don't think this will have this impact. I have a different view, and we will then have to deal with your different view, and we will come up with some stakeholder dialogues on different aspects where we see there's most need for a debate. So this start with proxies and involve target groups. This is our strategy in setting up such a monitoring system, because we want to involve people being interested in this area. Last point, it's about policy learning. We've seen that monitoring is one thing, monitoring of policies, monitoring of programs, but learning is another issue. So we set up a European Sustainable Development Network together with all the people in Europe being responsible for national sustainable development strategies, because in the year 2000, all of them showed up in Johannesburg with a strategy saying, we also got it, we have one. And then they came home and said, no, what to do now? And then they had to implement it, and they had to review it, they had to monitor it, to evaluate it, and they wanted to exchange experiences. And we started with a series of conferences. And nowadays, the European Sustainable Development Network, which you can find also on the internet, there's a broad information platform of the European Sustainable Development Network, is a facility to support policy learning among policymakers, among people working in public administrations, being responsible for sustainable development strategies and trying to learn from other countries. And our job as a kind of facilitator of this network is to support this policy learning by distinguishing between lessons learned and context. So describing case studies in a way that you can really learn out of it. So for example, we know that Switzerland linked its renewal procedures to their election procedures. So they said for each new government, a new sustainable development strategy. Nice idea, because it increases the relevance, the political relevance of a strategy. And all the other countries in Europe are very keen to know if this is a success or not. So we have to describe it in a way that you understand the circumstances and you understand the context, because it's not about copying, it's about understanding. So what we are doing are some country profiles. You find country profiles from all over Europe. showing what happens in which country with indicators, so about mechanisms for vertical integration, evaluation and review practices, indicators and monitoring practices all over Europe. So you can have a look at what happens in Germany, United Kingdom, France, and so on. We have some so-called quarterly reports, which we put together on some specific issues, as for example, public policies on CSR in the European member states, or horizontal policy integration and sustainable development. These are short surveys, Europe-wide surveys, where we put together what happens in which country and produce such kind of reports. We have some annual conferences, and this is not a closed shop, so if you're interested in exchanging experiences, just come to Europe, come to one of the conferences. Most of the times they are hosted by the country, by one country which is the presidency of the European Union in this certain period. So it's also nice to go there. And we have some workshops, smaller events on different issues where we can exchange experiences more in an informal way. So we bring together 30, 40 people from all over Europe being interested in these different areas. And in addition, we will have one project on knowledge brokerage, especially a knowledge brokerage between policymaking and research in the area of sustainable consumption. And we have one more proposal in line on the contradictions of sustainable consumption and economic growth. So what is the lesson learned about that? We have to proceed from information exchange to joint learning. So we saw that just delivering reports is just the first step. We have to deliver reports and bring together people, qualitative information, quantitative information, and to exchange experiences to contribute to joint learning. So I'd like to end up with just one more slide. How many indicators do we need to show reality? These are 108 indicators. What do you see? What do you see? Puzzle. Okay, we increased the number of indicators. What do you see now? 432 indicators. Just an idea what it is? United States, okay. Any other idea? United States, we already had that. Another guy said Texas. Perhaps we have to really increase the number of indicators. 100 okay. So that's about quantitative and qualitative information. Thank you very much.